7 licensed killers got changes for the next patch coming in December, and it seems like behavior went the quantity over quality route, as most of the changes are very small or not as impactful as we hoped for. This video will focus on the balance changes including the perks, so if you want to see the content of the new chapter, check out the pinned comment. And let's start with the first changes, and that is a Dracula Nerf to his shape-shifting cooldown, as it now takes 3.5 seconds instead of 2.5 seconds in order to transform. And as you can see, it makes his shapeshift feel clunkier than before. However, this is not something I expected as a nerf, as the cooldown after the transformation has remained unchanged. This means that, while it is worse to use bat form during a chase now after a hit, you can still use the bat in order to come close to a survivor and hit them. Next up, we have a nerf to his flame pillars, as now they take 10 seconds of cooldown instead of 7, making misses more punishing. I feel like the point of this nerf was to make players not depend that much on vampire form, and now if you miss, they want you to use the wolf form to compensate instead of waiting those 10 seconds. And since we're talking about wolf form, behavior did a small nerf to his chase potential, as now the scent orbs will spawn every 6 seconds instead of 5, which is not going to be game changing for many players, but it's a small nerf in the ability to catch up to survivors with increased haste. Finally, behavior buffed wolf form, and now the pounce attack charge time is 0.85 seconds instead of 1 second, giving survivor less of a reaction time to dodge it, as well as allowing Dracula hits in certain loops where he couldn't before. So it's clear that the devs wanted to make Dracula not depend on one form, and instead use all of them during the match. And I personally don't think Dracula is going to be any less from A tier as he was before. What I find absolutely crazy is that they did not nerf Medusa's hair at all, which is something I fully expected, and it is by far his most problematic add-on. I think they are going to nerf it before the chapter releases, just like they did with some of the Blight's add-ons. Otherwise, keeping it as is kinda wild. Next up, my predictions were partially right, as behavior decided to focus fully on the portals aspect of the Demogorgon, so they made the portal setting up speed faster by a small amount. Honestly, without a direct comparison, this looks like it's the same and won't affect matches that much. They also decreased the time to enter a portal a bit, but most importantly, they buffed the speed at which you travel through the portals. Post-editing MintSkull here, as you can see from the footage, it seems like this buff is bugged, as I don't notice any difference at all when traveling through portals. It's true that the right one arrives first, but that is not because of the speed during the travel, it's mostly because the portal opens faster. However, this came at a cost of various add-on nerfs. All of the add-ons that increase the sealing times of portals were nerfed by small percentages, and I am unsure as to why. I think that maybe the devs believe that now that portals are stronger, survivors will be more incentivized to seal them, but Demogorgon players will still use the shred add-ons instead of these, so it's overall a very weird choice by behavior. But finally, and the most impactful change in my opinion, is a complete rework to Lifeguard Whistle, as now instead of revealing survivors near active portals without charging your shred attack, now it only gives you 2 extra portals. This add-on was amazing for Devour Hope builds, and seeing it gone does make me sad, as we lost a very fun build to play with. I get that this add-on was hard to counter in solo queue, but we have perks like Pentimento, so they should have nerfed that instead of destroying this purple add-on. My predictions with Ghostface were completely right, and they made 2 of his brown add-ons partially base kit while nerfing those add-ons at the same time. So, if you use those add-ons, your power will feel exactly the same as the patch before, but if you don't use those add-ons, then Ghostface will feel a bit better, as now he stalks faster and his power cooldown is shorter. Overall, great changes, but Ghostface needs something more. Chucky got 2 nerfs and a buff to his power, and let's start with the buff because despite how small it is, it feels very smooth. Chucky's camper time is now decreased to 1 second instead of 1.3, and it feels significantly better to use. This will make Scamper feel more like an option instead of a detriment it was before, and I am glad that the devs are pushing that way. this came at a cost, as now the cooldown of Hidey Ho is 12 seconds instead of 10, but honestly the cooldown is still short enough to be a threat, and I don't think this is going to change much in terms of kill rate. Finally, they nerfed Rat Poison, so now it's not as busted as it was before. It's still a decent add-on even after such a drastic 50% nerf on everything, so that just shows how borderline busted this add-on was in the past. However, now that Scamper is stronger, I feel like the Ruler add-on has some potential in replacing Rat Poison's effects, as the add-on Chucky players will use in order to find hiding survivors. Overall, great changes. Surprisingly, Vecna got some buffs to his spell's cooldown, as well as 3 nerfs to compensate. But let's first talk about the buff, as now each spell has a different cooldown than before. Both Dispelling Sphere as well as Flight of the Damned now have 35 seconds of cooldown instead of 38, and then Fly's cooldown is significantly decreased, as now it has a 25 seconds cooldown, allowing Vecna to use this spell more freely as both a chase tool as well as a map mobility one, and it's great. Finally, Mage Hand got a nerf, as it now has a 40 seconds cooldown, and while I personally don't think this was necessary, it's true that this was his strongest spell. Now the cooldown add-ons for Vecna also got nerfs, with the basic attack one only decreasing 3 seconds of the spell cooldown, and the Ring of Spell Storing now only reduces 2 seconds instead of 4. I still think these add-ons are fantastic, and considering that Mage Hand got a nerf, I think Vecna mains will still use this add-on regardless. Dispelling Sphere got an unnecessary nerf of 15 seconds less from the duration of disabling magic items, but by far the most unnecessary nerf in my opinion is the increased cooldown after cancelling a spell to 1.25 seconds instead of 1 second. This is by far the most noticeable change in my opinion, and it feels really sluggish. It's a direct nerf to faking Mage Hand baits, as now it takes longer to basic attack, and in close loops, this can be enough to be the difference between a survivor reaching a pallet or getting hit. I guess the nerfs were here because Vecna objectively has an amazing kill rate, but he is still a B tier killer in my opinion, which only goes to A tier with absolute mastery from his mains. Wesker got a very small buff to his Virulent Bound cooldown, and now it takes 0.5 seconds less to charge each dash. Overall, this is a 1 second buff to him, which does not account for the speed increase when you have everyone infected, so I guess it is a noticeable buff, but it's not going to be game changing either way in my opinion, as Wesker was an already decent and perfect killer as is. And finally, in terms of killer changes, we have the long awaited Michael Myers buffs. Before I begin this section, I want to say that I find it disappointing how this is all he got after years of waiting, and there are some things that I wish were included, like a toggle to activate tier 3 just like the Oni can instead of it being automatic, as well as a complete add-on pass. However, in terms of what we got, I think this is a very great step in the right direction. First of all, Myers' speed is now 4.4 in tier 1 instead of being 4.2, so tier 1 is no longer as annoying as it was before. They also made it easier to tier up to tier 2, so honestly at this point, I don't understand why tier 1 even exists, and I think making Myers a stance killer that can go back to tier 1 would make significantly more sense than the current state that he is in. But let's talk about the stalking changes, because finally, Myers will stalk faster from afar instead of from up close. So this means you can strategically camp certain places in order to snipe stalk survivors just like in the movies, and this feels so much better. In fact, when a survivor finds out and they try to escape, you actually stalk them faster the further away they leave, and you can still tier up during a chase as long as you have it 99% like before. However, whenever you find a survivor out in the open who doesn't want to leave, it's true that it feels slower to stalk than before. However, they buffed the minimum speed of Myers stalk to 0.4 instead of 0.1, so it will still feel significantly faster than the stalk rate from afar in the past. And by far the change I noticed the most is that they doubled the amount of stalk each survivor has to 20, and in my test match against bots, I did not feel at any point that I was running out of stalk. This makes Myers significantly better to play as, and as someone who has mained Myers in the past, let me tell you, even if these changes seem small, try them out in game because Myers feels the best he has ever been, and now in open maps, it actually makes him stronger than before. Add-on wise, they increase the amount of stock you need for the 2 eerie add-ons, and they take a lot to charge compared to before. However, again, you now can stock various survivors for longer, so it's not as impactful as it may seem, but it's still a significant nerf to both eerie add-ons if you stack them. Tombstone Piece surprisingly did not get gutted. It did get a nerf, so it takes longer to get it, but again, in terms of percentages, it's actually the same amount of stock as it did before, so the only change is the time it takes to get Tombstone Piece, but you can just snipe survivors from afar. Finally, they decided to nerf Scratch Mirror, as now you still keep the 4.2 meters per second speed instead of the new 4.4 for using this add-on. I don't get why this was necessary, as this add-on was really bad outside of memes, and it will still stay that way, which is disappointing. Overall, I am pretty happy with these changes, and I think they are a good step in the right direction. However, Myers needs a whole marathon of changes instead of just a step, so hopefully this is not the last time we see Myers in a balanced patch. Finally, let's talk about perk changes, starting with Dominance, which got its numbers buffed to be twice than before. I think this perk was nice, and now it is nicer, so overall in certain totem builds, 16 seconds of time lost is a lot, so I am okay with these numbers. Human Greed got a reduction to the cooldown on kicking chests. I still don't get why it even has a cooldown in the first place, but I guess this change is a buff and it's nice. Languid Touch got a significant buff, as now the cooldown for this effect to proc again is 5 seconds instead of 20. Not only does this make this perk way better than before when 2 survivors are near you, you can now proc this perk infinitely on a survivor as long as they keep scaring crows. This change solidified Languid Touch as the best anti-exhaustion perk in the entire game, with the only thing keeping it from being super strong is the RNG of crows on various maps. Weave Attunement finally got a nerf, and now not only does it reveal the aura of survivors less than before, as it's now an 8 meters radius instead of 12, it also reveals the location of the items to the survivors inside. So this perk is now completely useless in my opinion, and it's quite sad as it was already useless against teams that knew how easy this perk was to counter. It is still objectively better for the health of the game, as a lot of solo queue survivors are casuals that did not have that knowledge. Ace in the Hole got a nice buff, as now you can get brand new parts or syringes in your items, as well as a guarantee of a second add-on too. This can come in clutch in some matches. Pharmacy is no longer the most useless perk in the entire game, as it now is active at all times. Searching chests is faster, and also the hearing distance is reduced from making noises in chests. Finally, Pharmacy is a decent perk to use for chest builds, and I am glad to see it buffed. I am sure this change will make my least used perks video outdated. Talking about chest builds, Plunder's Instinct is now double the range, as well as it makes items better 50% of the time, so overall it's quite a decent buff to this perk. And finally, Scene Partner got buffed by a bit, as now it reveals the aura of the killer for 1 second more, and it also got its cooldown reduced by 20 seconds, so now it's 40 seconds instead of 1 minute. It's still a meme quality perk. Overall, these changes are more positive than negative, and I am pretty happy with the Myers buffs we are getting. Let me know in the comments what changes do you think are the best, and which ones do you think you would have added yourself. As always, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.